Nico,
See, Julian.
hey. What you were saying to it reminded me, well, the last part of the something's wrong thing. Um, yeah, recently I noticed like most of the time I feel like it's not a very intense, but it's there pretty much most of the time, like either irritability or I've talked about it before, or like a restlessness, and I don't know, something you said also about the problem being you, no? Being, and the, a lot of the things you said, I had a dream last night. I won't tell it all, but I'll say you the important parts. That there was like at some point I was somewhere outside and I was kind of naked, and I think I was looking for my clothes or something. There were other people, and there was a hole in the dark hole in the ground where suddenly like um hundreds of thousands of wasps start coming out, black wasps starting out. And I've like at some point I escape like flying, and then at another point, and you say something, you're in the dream, and you say something like it's you, or you are the cause. It's exactly what you were saying to Trina, no? And and then at another point, I was like in a bar listening to some people talk, and I realized you were right. And I call you, and I wanted to speak to you and say, like, how the hell did you know? Like, to me, it was something totally external that could me be the cause, and well, something like that. The dream continues, but um, I found it interesting because it's like the same theme, I think. Yeah, I don't know what the question is. Maybe
Yeah,
the dream says something to you.
for me, the key of what you're saying is how you describe it has more to do with sensation. So, you know how Trina described it, and it was like more narrative, and in your case, it's a sensation. So irritation, restlessness.
Yeah,
That's
it's in the body usually.
yeah, and there's a similar approach where it has to do with looking at what's the nature of that. And so, in a sense, you can look at what would be or could be the thoughts that are happening around the irritation, around the restlessness. There is a side to it that is more thought based. And so I'm just going to say something to you as well, because it's so related and this could be useful. For you, it would be the reverse. Like, look at what are the sensations. So it was clear to you the thought process, and maybe the sensations are as well. But It's just interesting. We tend to recognize more one side than the other. And it's really kind of a vicious complex, like a loop. It's sensations and thoughts, they come together. But then we react more to one, we pay attention and react more to one than the other. And the other one becomes kind of hidden. And so for you, Julian, look at what are the thoughts and the narratives and the beliefs around the story of you. And that could unlock the sensations that are appearing as in the emotional space, and vice versa when it's reversed. And this could happen depending on the moment. I can now be more involved with the thoughts, and I can look at the sensations. But only when that whole sensation, thought, emotion complex is transparent and clear, then we can start to look at what's happening. What happens is something is assumed to be real, and it becomes the anchor of the issue. So if the sensation is a real thing, it becomes the anchor to the whole narrative. Or if something that we believed in a narrative is a real thing, then it becomes the anchor to the emotional reaction. But by seeing the whole thing, we can start to look at what appears to be real when it's not. And I'll say it this way: anything that appears to be real is not real.
In my case, you're saying it's more likely because you said look more at the thoughts, more likely I'm taking certain ideas for reality.
Yes, you're taking for granted. Yeah,
about me.
Yeah. It might not be about you, it might be about something else, but the assumption is when something else is real, for example, I don't know, the guy across the room is looking at me in like a very shitty way, and he shouldn't do that. That becomes real. When that is assumed to be real, it implicitly means I am real as that whom the imagined person is having an opinion on or whatever. And then because that is a reality, this person is having this opinion, now I am going to react emotionally to that. And the emotional reaction is going to be a consequence directly to the man looking at me with a terrible opinion of me or whatever. I'm just imagining some. And then the solution to the emotional pain I'm in is the man not doing what he's doing, which I imagined in the first place. And then I can come up with any example where it's even harder to debunk the reality of. Because, for example, like just as an example of something that for me would be harder, if Catherine says like I'm really angry with you because you da 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 da, and I did the thing that she's angry about, right? And then I can now have a whole emotional reaction to that. And it could be that the only solution is for her to stop being angry.
Or
yeah. So this is what happens, and I don't realize that she could be angry and I don't have to have an emotional reaction that then makes the whole thing worse. Because it's a hypothetical example, it's hard for me to kind of walk through it and kind of imagine it correctly. But that's the kind of thing that happens, is there is an assumption of something and we make it real. And I want to clarify what I mean by real. By real, I mean I assume something to be other than what it is. So, for example, the thought of the man, or the man across the room, when I make it real is when it's more than a thought. So if I'm aware I have a thought, an imagination that the person's across the room is upset with me or something, and I know that's just a thought, which could be correct. But now when it's not just a thought, it actually is the man across the room, then I'm making the thought to be something other than it is. I'm making it to be a reality that is, in a sense, objective. And so, for example, at the other side, if I'm having a pain, an emotional reaction, a pain, if I'm aware of that, all it is sensation. It's just a texture of sensation. But when I make it real, it has an objective quality to it. It's a pain that has an origin, and the origin is beyond me. It's probably around something that happened. But I make the sensation more than just sensation. When ultimately what is happening is there's thoughts, there's sensations, there's sounds, there's images, and then we can navigate. And nothing is absolutely real. It's all possibly more real than something else, and less real than something else. It's all in this dance of reality on reality. And I can never know for sure what is real and what is not. And nothing is fully ultimately real or fully ultimately not real. And only there I can be not conditioned and navigate with more discernment. And all of the stuff that's not real starts to fall really fast when, like, things that seem to be super real suddenly is like, no, that's just an imagination. It has nothing to do with what's really happening. Boom, it falls. A lot of stuff starts to dissolve and fall, and then everything becomes much easier to navigate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something made resonated when you said about making the sensation more real. I think when I do that, there's a story attached.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you're going to first feel a sensation and you're going to be kind of like a victim of it. It's like, this is just happening. I can do nothing about it. And then you can see if you discover the thought process around it, you could have a similar experience, or you could start to see like, oh, I'm having this whole assumption of this. What if I don't assume that to be real? Suddenly all of the emotional reactivity stops, and then you realize, oh, the emotional reactivity was the hole with the bees or the wasps. But if I don't assume this to be real, it just stops.
Mm. Yeah.
And when that happens, you suddenly realize, well, what is real then? It's very confusing.
Yeah, I don't know if I've had that experience with this thing. I usually feel it almost as if it were something physical of the body.
Yeah, it's not. It's your thinking first. It's like the same time, the thought and the emotion. The thought is simultaneous, but because the emotional aspect to you seems to be more real, the thought is kind of more hidden. That's where the assumption is, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And at the core of it, when I say in the dream, it's you, it's because at some point it's a decision that something has to be different. Something that is happening shouldn't happen, or something that's not happening should happen. Like should be now. It's a decision of what is right now. It's a decision. Something should not be as it is, or something that isn't should be.
Yeah. A certainty.
Yeah. And it's an attachment, it's a desire, and it stems from I know.
I know it shouldn't be, or I know how it should be or not.
I know this should not be, or this should be. I decide, I know. I want. I.
Yeah.
Which is different than when that which I'm describing, as that starts to fall away or stop, what is, there's absolutely no reaction, because there's the understanding that it could not be any different. The car drives by, I hear the sound, there is sound of car, it could not be any different. Everything that is as it is, it could not be any different. When that's really truly seen, there is just a complete acceptance. And then there could be creativity, which I call like co-creation. It's like, well, I have a movement, there is an acceptance of what is, and there's a movement of creating a change, moving with what is. Have a conversation, go have food because I'm hungry, create a business, anything, which is different from what is should not be, and I'm trying to change what is. And the problem is no longer in me, now it's the government. Or the partner or the job or you have to go. Okay. But they all waved at you, by the way.
Thanks, Nico.
You're welcome.